Marshall Chriswell is with us this morning for this installment of Marshall Law. And good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you with us here today. Now, when you came in, you said you were kind of intrigued by the topic of libel and slander and all of those issues today. People saying bad things about other people.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and the general term for that type of law is defamation, mm-hmm. and it's very, very common for someone to call up or a current client to ask a question about this and say, hey, somebody is saying some really nasty things about me, whether it's online or in the community, mm-hmm. And I want to sue them for it, you know, and it's one of those. Situations where, that's a good thing to talk about, but it's a very difficult, when you sit down and analyze it, it's a really difficult cause of action to pursue, a difficult case to win in a lot of situations.
The laws are complex, and I would guess that the social media implications now make it even more complex.
It is. I mean, at its base, the law of defamation is really one about competing interests, right? You've got our overarching right to free speech in this country, right? And you're and that's it's not only a constitutional right; it's very ingrained in our culture as having the right to speak freely. Yeah. But when does that cross the line and become injurious to cause injury to another person, to their reputation? Mm-hmm. And those are that's the constant battle that you're the conflict that you're dealing with in defamation cases.
So what are some of the issues that one must deal with if one is trying to prove they have been slandered or libeled? And there is a difference between slander and libel, isn't there?
That's right. Yeah, slander is defamation by spoken word. So if you're talking to someone or you're making a speech, for instance, or you're on television and you're giving an interview and you say something defamatory about someone else, that's slander. Mm-hmm. Libel is defamation by the written word. So if you publish a book with a defamatory statement in it, or a newspaper article or otherwise. So
and the word malice becomes a big part of this as well, does it not?
It does. When you're talking about defamatory statements that relate to public, what the law calls public persons. Mm-hmm. Those can be politicians and celebrities and professional athletes and elected officials, government officials, CEOs, anybody that's kind of put themselves out there in the public light, in the public forum. You have to prove you have a higher burden of proof whenever you're trying to prove defamation. So if I'm an elected official and I say somebody defamed me, I have to prove that person knew what they were saying was a false statement and they did it with actual malice to try to hurt me. And we do that because people put themselves out there as public public personas, and they take on a little bit more of a risk with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in political season, that becomes something that the public might sit back and say, how do they get away with saying that?
That's right.
But that burden of proof is a pretty hard hurdle to overcome, isn't it?
It's very difficult. The other thing about defamation cases that make them very difficult to win sometimes is that a defamatory statement, by its very nature, has to be false. It has to be a false statement. You have to prove that it was a false statement. Mm-hmm. So statements of, for example, a statement of opinion would not be. It would not qualify as defamation. So if you own a restaurant and somebody goes online and posts a review and says, that is the worst tasting soup I have ever had at that restaurant, mm-hmm. that's an opinion. It's not defamation. Also, an insult would not be defamation. You go on social media and you call somebody every name in the book, unless you've made a false statement. That's not defamation.
And there are a few jokes in there as well. So the average person who thinks that they have been slandered or they have been libeled, mm-hmm. they call you and they say, "Hey, listen, this is what this person said about me, and it's out there in the public now. People are talking about me because of it."
Right.
Obviously, that burden of truth is the first thing, but what must the process, how does that unfold then after that?
Sure. So we look at, okay, what are the elements that you're going to have to prove to win your case? You're going to have to prove that it was a false statement. You're going to have to prove that other people heard it, that third parties either heard or read the statement, that they understood it, that they understood the person was talking about you, and they understood the nature of the statement and that it was injurious to you, and also that the statement was unprivileged, meaning that it wasn't stated in a court of law or in a deposition or another situation where the law has said that there's a privilege. So those are the things you're going to have to prove. And then let's say we run through all those and we say, okay, well, there's a chance that you could prove these things. Okay, next step is, can you prove that there were actual money damages? Mm-hmm. Because just because somebody says something false about you doesn't mean, maybe it has hurt your reputation a little in the community, but has it damaged you monetarily, and are you going to be able to recover anything for it? Yeah. That's where a lot of cases just halt right there, because there's not, you haven't had lost wages or lost business or something because of that. And then let's say we get through all that and say, okay, there may be some money damages here. Then you have to look at, okay, is it worth bringing a civil lawsuit? Because, there are, first of all, there are considerations, as with all lawsuits, how much time is it going to take? A civil lawsuit can anywhere from 1 to 3 years on average to wind its way through the court system. That's a long time to be dealing with this. The attorney's fees and the money you're going to have to lay out for it, the uncertainty of winning. So those are general concerns that relate to all civil cases. And then there are some specific concerns that relate to defamation cases. Number one, you're suing because you didn't want this statement to be out in the public in the first place, okay? Mm-hmm. And we're going to commence a lawsuit where there's going to be nothing but talk of, we're going to be talking about nothing but what this statement is, and it's going to be out there for longer than maybe you would have wanted. Mm-hmm. So you're publicizing it even more. It's kind of like the, did you ever hear the Streisand effect?
The Streisand effect.
The Streisand effect.
Tell me.
Barbara Streisand, back in the 80s when she was very popular, someone, I guess it would have been the early 90s, the internet had just become popular. Somebody published on the internet a photo of her house, an overhead aerial photo of her home, mm-hmm. and she sued them for publicizing where she lived. Okay. At the time when she sued, excuse me, the photo was available on about 5 websites on the internet. After she sued, it was available on about 30,000 websites on the internet. So you can get a little bit of the Streisand effect. You gain even wider publication of this statement that you didn't want out there in the first place. So there are those concerns.
So I'm walking through the bookstore over the weekend, and I see a book lining out the reasons why Lyndon Baines Johnson had John F. Kennedy killed.
Okay.
And those are public figures, and we understand that that's really not what we're talking about here. But a couple of weeks ago, I got a call here from somebody who said, I have it. I saw it on Facebook that there's this high-profile murder case, and the wrong person's being charged. And they're talking about who the real person was that did it, and they're naming names on the internet, on Facebook. Mm-hmm. That would seem to me the classic defamation pursuit for that person who's being named on the internet.
Yeah, that if that person that's being named is can be considered a public person in any way, then of course there's a higher burden there. You can say lots and lots of things about public, but if it's a private person that you're accusing of criminal conduct and you're doing it in a negligent way where you know that what you're saying might be false or you don't have knowledge that it's not true, then certainly if that causes actual damages to that person, it's absolutely a defamation case.
Yeah. Okay. So those are some of the things that we talk about, and because you can remain somewhat anonymous on the internet, there are more and more of those sorts of accusations out there. But all of that is traceable. We could we could easily, law enforcement could easily figure out who's making statements in a case.
Yeah, you can serve subpoenas to Facebook and Twitter, and generally you're going to be able to get some information that can lead you to an IP address that can lead you to a person that's making that statement. But there are some situations, of course, anonymous accounts that are used on public computers that are tougher to trace. Yeah.
Which really comes into what you were talking about earlier. These cases take a long time to work out, and you must be prepared, and I guess you must be pretty well convinced in order to follow it through.
You really do. You really have to be committed. And like I said, the only cases that really make it past a cease and desist letter and actually turn into a civil lawsuit are the ones where you've got some actual money damages, some real monetary harm that has occurred.
Yeah, it's like Paul Simon said, I've been slandered and libeled and heard words I never heard in the Bible. But,
That's right.
But it is out there, and it is more prevalent. You do hear many more than probably you did even 5 or 10 years ago because of social media, I would guess.
Way more. And there are, like I said, there are so many people that immediately when someone says something about them on the internet think that, well, I can turn around and sue them, or I can bring a criminal charge. And really, our society, for lots of good reasons, our society and our culture allows a lot of that back and forth, even though it can get pretty nasty.
It absolutely does. All right. Somebody wants to learn more and maybe pursue such a case with you. What do they need to do?
You can always give me a call at 724-465-5826. Go online to www.westernpalawyer.com or see us in the Atrium Building, downtown Indiana.
Very good. Thank you, Marshall.
Thanks, Todd. See ya.
It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS, AM 1160 and 101.1 FM.